Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, and the B.L. Manger Foundation.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. Those of you who know me well know that the Purim time of year is one of my favorite times of year. And as we enter that time of year, I'm thinking about the different questions related to Purim. And one of those that comes up is the idea of diaspora. The idea of what does it mean to think about the one Jewish holiday that really exists outside of the land of Israel, and how does it make us think about living outside of the land of Israel? And to do that today, I'm bringing in someone who I would be comfortable asking any Jewish question about any Jewish text or holiday, and I'd be thrilled to chat with her about it. And in addition to that, she happens to be going through her own experiment right now, which that she is an American Jew in Israel this year. Along with her husband, Rabbi Elana Hain, and her two lovely boys. They are living in Israel for the year. The last time she was on this show, you saw her, she was about to leave for the year in Israel, and so hopefully we'll catch up and hear how it's been going. My guest, of course, today is Dr. Elana Stein Hain. Elana Stein Hain is the Rosh, Beit, Midrash, and a senior research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America, where I had the privilege of working in the same hallway as her, and that was very special. I look back on that fondly, being able to pop down the hall, bang on Elana's door, wait till she was between calls, and then ask her whatever I wanted to ask her that day. How lucky was I? And now we have to do WhatsApps and wait till she comes to the studio from Israel so I can catch her. This is my last time I saw her was in the studio here, so yeah, and now we're just chatting again in the same spot. In addition to her work, part of her work at the Hartman Institute is she is the host of Texting, a bi-weekly podcast that considers issues relevant to Jewish life through the lens of classical and modern Torah texts. She's also author of this book, Circumventing the Law, Rabbinic Perspectives on Legal Loopholes and Integrity, which uses loopholes as a lens for understanding rabbinic views on law and ethics. And she teaches Din and Daf, a conceptual analysis of legal thought in Daf Yomi, which is the daily Talmud study cycle. And as part of living in Israel this year, she is researching religious Zionism, which I hope we get to discuss as well. Dr. Stein Hain, aka for me, Elana, with respect.
Hi.
Hi.
It's great to be here.
Great to have you here. Literally the last time we chatted was at this desk in person. We've chatted a lot over the course of the year.
The truth is, it's actually geographically closer to come here when I'm in town at work than it would be to meet anywhere else. So actually, this works.
That's true. That's why we're in Times Square. We're close to everything. That's great. That's great.
Totally.
All right, so let's just start there. The last time we saw you, we were preparing for Av. You gave us for the 9th of Av. You gave us Torah to prepare for Tisha B'Av, thinking about destruction. And you were about to get on a plane with your family to go to Israel for the year.
Yeah.
We're about halfway through that year, let's say. I don't want to ruin it for you.
Don't make me sad. Don't make me sad.
Just first, tell us, what's it, an American Jew in Israel?
Okay, American Jew in Israel, I'm going to put it like this. An American Jew in Israel who is planning to stay for 1 year.
Yes.
Right? This is not an aliyah experience.
Does that mean no one takes you seriously?
It means everybody tries to get us to stay for more than 1 year. But what I actually think is interesting about this year is I think my kids are thriving because they know it's a year. So they're looking at it as an adventure.
Yeah.
Rather than as something, we have to get used to our new lives.
Got it.
Which I think is really an interesting, for some kids it might go in the opposite direction.
Right.
For my kids it happens to be going in that direction. I will say, now when I think, if we're going to talk about Purim, when I think about Persia, I think about Iran now, which is not something that I used to think about a lot, because for the first time, I've actually never been in a bomb shelter before my experience living in Israel for the year.
Yeah.
And my children and I, even before my husband was able to get to Israel, because for work he was still in America through the high holidays,
right.
We found ourselves in a bomb shelter with Iranian missiles overhead. And that was a heart-pounding experience. And I would say, it just made me further amazed by how people have been living with the kind of degree of urgency around them for well over a year that they have. I'm absolutely shocked, because I have to tell you, we're also having a great time. Our friends are happy, they're resilient, they celebrate things.
Sure.
My kid's playing on a national baseball training team, at Baptist Village in Petah Tikva, and everyone's just, like there could be a missile attack. We go into the shelter, which is outdoors, just like 5 pieces of cement, essentially.
Okay.
And then 10 minutes later, you go play baseball. Like you just go back onto the field and you go play baseball. So I would say I'm definitely in touch with my mortality and the mortality of my family in a way that I have never been.
Wow.
And that took a long time for me to get used to and to just say, yeah, but that is how people live here. And then I would say sort of pepper on that, you're watching people whose children are in the army. Like my colleagues, all their children, their children, their spouses, and they're just carrying on and having regular lives. So the fact that we chose to be there this year, for them is kind of a way of saying, oh, we're here as a shoulder, as a help, as an appreciator, that kind of thing, let alone we have so much family in Israel and we are so, so, so blessed to be spending time with them, a lot of time with them. It's really, really fantastic. So thank God, it's a mix of a sobering reality with a lot of love, a lot of immersive, flourishing life, and with like real tragic bumps along the way. A few weeks ago, our good friends Effie and Oshrat Shoham in Jerusalem, they lost their son Yuval, and that we had eaten Friday night dinner with them, with Yuval. He was out for a Shabbat, for a weekend. We had eaten Friday night dinner with them 2 months before. So it's a different way of living. But if you ask us on an average day, how's it going? The answer is wonderful. Like it's a very, very strange reality, and the discourse is so, so, so different. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. The discourse is very, very different about the war, about the hostages. The discourse is so different in at least South Jerusalem, which is where we're living, which is sort of like a liberal enclave within Israel. So it has its own.
All right, so I have a lot of questions, but let's just pick up the end of what you just said. Tell me a little bit about the discourse piece of it.
Yeah, so I would say, I think the discourse in America about the war against Iran, really, right? And all of its proxies, but probably the against Hamas piece. The discourse in America revolves around either like support, or discussing numbers of casualties and whether you think that number of that number is warranted. The push to get the hostages out does not conflict in America with the continuation of the war. In Israel, like I would say, maybe none of those things are true, that I would say. Like there is the sense of knee-jerk support. I mean, I'm sitting in South Jerusalem. There are a lot of people who want their government gone. And I'm watching that during a war, while people are sending their children off to war, which the government is helping to wage. The idea of bringing the hostages back and continuing the war, these things are at odds with each other, and there is almost no discussion about casualties in Gaza, almost none. So it's just, the emphasis is different, the concerns are different, and look, I'm part of both worlds, and so I hear these things in multiple ways in multiple places, but it's just interesting to be there as an observer, and as a real outsider. Like I understand what's going on. I'm not just, but I'm still an outsider to it.
All right, so a few things. One, you remind me, Deanna Ginsburg, who you introduced me to, sharing a story in the seat you're sitting in about one of the people she works with as part of her organization, how he serves in the army, and then whenever he's off from the army, goes in Gaza, and then when he's off from the army, goes back into Gaza as part of a human rights organization trying to bring people aid. Now, like this, insane.
It's an incredibly Israeli story.
Right.
It's an incredibly Israeli story that I think people here might not even be able, many people here might not even be able to imagine. Like, I'll tell you something, you have all of these stickers of, like, just on lampposts, on fences, everywhere you go, you see stickers of young boys or some young women also who died in the line of fire in this war. And they're smiling. There's a picture of them smiling with a message, live life to the fullest, like something that they said in their letters to their families, their goodbye letters. It's so out of step with the way you would think a warrior, a soldier would be depicted. Somebody's just a bright smile, telling you to love the person next to you. There are these juxtapositions that I think being there, it just really enriches my understanding of the way that people are living.
Holding multiple truths.
I mean, just actually living multiple experiences that sometimes feel like they are just even self-contradictory, right? And it's kind of remarkable. I'll be honest. Like, I'm just going to be one of those cheerleaders. I think these Israeli people are unbelievable.
Amazing. Wait, so let me back us up just for 1 second, though. You probably told me this when you came before the 9th of Av.
I should say one more thing, which is, I think that the Israeli people are remarkable people, and I think for Israeli Jews, it's a lot easier right now than for Israeli Arabs. I think for Israeli Arabs, they're caught in the middle in a different kind of way. So easier on the score of, Yachad Ninatzeach, together we're going to win.
Yeah.
Harder for the other whatever percentage of the population.
Sure.
So like I also see that, especially because I work at Hartman where we have Arab Israeli citizens both as like a VP of our org and also as fellow scholars. So you have conversations and just the experiences that people are having. The whole thing is gut-wrenching, to be honest. It really, really is gut-wrenching for everyone.
Right. Can I trouble you? I want to be respectful of your colleagues' privacy, and I don't want to paint broad strokes, but can you go a little bit further there, share kind of some examples or anecdotes of Israeli Arab citizen colleagues?
I think, I want to be careful about it. I think what I would say is, for Israeli Jews, we know that when Hamas attacks us not just as Israel, but Hamas attacks us as Jews. There are also Arab Israeli citizens, or as many call themselves, Palestinian citizens of Israel, who died on that day, were taken hostage on that day, right? And a few people have been rescued actually, and we just sadly heard of 2 people who were killed and their bodies were brought back last week. But just imagine yourself as somebody who's caught in this crossfire, as you're an Israeli, but you're not the real target. And the people who are the real targets now from Israel, they might even be related to you. Or at least they share many the same religion as you, right? If you call yourself a Palestinian citizen and those people are Palestinians, forget about Hamas. I'm talking about the regular innocent people on the ground, children, right? So in the meantime, while many Israeli Jews are losing their family members fighting in Gaza, many Israeli Arabs are either losing family members or are just looking at this and saying, we would make a totally different calculation as to what the scope of this war would be. So that is, and if you're honest about it, it's a heart-wrenching conversation because both sides are coming to it with like their lives at stake, like literally their lives at stake. So if you have an empathetic bone in your body, you have to see that these are people who are fighting for their survival, Jews and Arab Israelis. Like it's wild.
Wow.
It's wild.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. So and that's in between baseball practice and drums.
It's amazing.
But that's what I'm saying. Like that's just just the reality of it. You don't, and you have to be sympathetic and empathetic and just be there in case someone dies. Like that's
right.
It's what? It's just a different.
It's too crazy.
It also puts things in certain perspective. It really, really does, to be honest. so funny. I don't think we thought we were going to talk about this part as much
Why?
as we are, but I think
This is a real thing.
I think
you're
it's
doing.
honest. Like,
it's totally fine, 100%.
Yeah. And I think it's because I'm American that
No, you have a
like,
whole different lens.
It's a different lens.
You're showing up. It's a very interesting thing. Also, that's why I wanted to also zoom out for 1 second. Did you guys decide? Was it a pre-October 7th decision that you always wanted to go to Israel for this year, or were you like what pushed you to do this? I know it was on your radar.
We are very Zionistic people. We truly believe in the project of having the Jewish people in our homeland, trying to build a good society. We have a lot of family there. So we actually started making plans for this the summer before October 7th. Mm-hmm. And throughout the year, I only felt more strongly that last year I was in the wrong place. I did not want to be looking at the news. I wanted to be going over to my friend's home or to my family members to give them a hug. It needed to be something else. The way that I say it to my colleagues is essentially like, it's sad to say it this way, but when you go and you're willing to be there, what I'm saying to them is what happens to you happens to me.
Sure.
And that's a real statement of love and commitment and care. And we wanted to make that statement. And we deeply feel like we're in the right place.
Right.
Deeply, deeply, deeply.
In terms of talking to your children about this,
Yes.
how did you broach the subject and how did you portray the year? Was it also similar, like, we always feel like we're Zionistic, but especially now we want to be there for friends and family there? How did you frame it
So
for
I think
them?
we gave them, I don't know, we always give layers, you know? Like one layer was our ancestors would have killed for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Like they would not have been able to believe the possibility of doing this and being there. Another was family, and a third was when crisis happens, you show your loyalty. You show who you are and what your values are, and that's what we're doing.
Beautiful.
And my kids are amazing. I mean, they're picking up so much. They're, they went to the Shiva with us, and we're part of that. It's reality.
Wow.
It's reality. And I'd rather they face it as friends and supporters, which is how they feel, than as outsiders to it. But we'll see in the long run what they have to say. Maybe you'll turn this into a couch, and in 20 years you'll interview them and see what they have to say about what that whole thing was like. Because they don't like being woken up by the Houthis at 4:30 in the morning. Right? That's not a good part. That's not something we wanted to have to expose them to. Right? And thankfully we're in Jerusalem, so it doesn't happen as often, but it wasn't a plan. It wasn't our plan.
And Ash, on that note, you keep saying South Jerusalem. Give me examples of what we're talking about so people can follow.
Oh, so this is what people should know. Like, we're in a place called Arnona, which is like Talpiot and Baka and Armona Netziv, and you have a lot of Anglos there. And it's a very open-minded group of people, right? These are a lot of the people who are against the judicial reform. These are a lot of people who are working on behalf of the hostages. But those same people are losing their children and their spouses in high numbers. So, when you talk about people being liberal in Israel, they're literally sending their children off to war, and they couldn't be prouder. They couldn't be prouder of the heroism of their children. It's not reluctant, it's we have to protect the Jewish state, we have to protect the Jewish people. That is our responsibility. And the way these kids talk, these 20-something-year-olds, the way they talk is, I have them in my own family, but I have no permission to talk about them, so I'm not going to. But the way they talk, it's a maturity and a sense of seeing something bigger than oneself that I couldn't even begin to describe. You have to see it. You just have to see it.
It's really, again, it comes back to this theme of like being able to hold your beliefs and also live your life at the same time. Like, I guess it's just population-wise, the average American is not the parent of someone in the army, but this idea of being able to be like, I'm totally against our current government and I'm going to go protect it right now.
Yeah, I think also there's something to the fact that the government like the executive of the government doesn't make all the decisions around policy and war, right? Like you have a lot of security chiefs and things like that who have to do that. So I think there's part of that, but I do think that I see people with a lot of cognitive dissonance because everybody recognizes that there's an existential danger here, and they may differ in terms of how long they think the war should go on, the price of, the chatufim, the hostages, as compared to the war. These are not easy things to figure out, and the average person has opinions about them, even as they're making sometimes the ultimate sacrifice.
Crazy. Okay, so you've, and we could talk longer on this, but you've a little bit laid out what it's like to, let's say, come from diaspora to Israel and also be a diaspora Jew in Israel, which is unique. Let's use that to transition a little bit into the holiday of Purim.
Let's do it.
Yeah, this is the diaspora holiday. This gives us some flavors of how to think about being in diaspora.
Diaspora holiday.
I
think
Purim
it's
is coming.
so
Talk
funny.
to me.
You know what I think is so funny? If you think about Hanukkah, so Hanukkah is the Israel holiday, right? Hanukkah is about we got our sovereignty back, we got our temple back, we have an army, right? It's like a very Zionist holiday. It's like the proto-Zionist holiday. Great, right?
Yeah.
So like when American Jews look at Hanukkah, many American Jews, they have to kind of domesticate it because it can't be about Israel because we're not living in Israel. So it's going to be about light.
Yeah. By the way, we literally have different dreidels.
It's going to be about light. So we have different dreidels, right? A miracle happened there. A miracle happened here. Different dreidels. Okay, fine. Totally.
So you're saying we kind of like sweep it under the rug and we make it about light. I'm not saying
everybody does. I'm saying, look, liturgy still says it and people still say, but we make it about light and we make it about presence and we, a little like that. So I think there's a similar, and I'll see what happens when it's actually Purim time in Israel.
Well, you just had this for Hanukkah, I guess you got a taste of the
but I'm curious, Purim being such a diasporic holiday, and by the way, Hanukkah was great for the Israelis. It was so helpful for the Israelis. It was like model that we can win. Like we can protect ourselves. We can have sovereignty. Sometimes you just need those reinforcing feelings, right?
Which I feel like people weren't talking about last year Hanukkah time, but this year they really. It's much more. We had Rav Judah Michel here, and he was very like, maybe we'll be blessed with military victory, kind of like, we have a model for this.
Thank God, Israel is literally the strongest country in the Middle East right now. Yeah. Who would have thought that last year? That's Hanukkah.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's actually Hanukkah. Purim, however, is a diaspora holiday, right? Like, let's think about what the message of the Purim story itself is, okay? Just read the book. Read the book of Esther. Here's what happens. We're in diaspora. In that diaspora, somebody from government threatens to have us decimated. We wind our way into government, both because it happens that a Jewish woman is chosen to be the queen, and because Mordecai helped foil a plot against the king, and then eventually he becomes second to the king, and then the Jews are actually able to save themselves by fighting, and mostly the government people let them do it because they're afraid of Mordecai, who's now second to the king, right? So what happens here? The Jews succeed in diaspora. They defeat a foe, right? Now, if you read the book itself, God's name is not in there anywhere. They don't go back to Israel. They don't talk about it. There's none of that, right? What you actually see is, I would even say it's like the anti-Passover story, like the anti-Pesach story.
Why?
Because the day of the decree against the Jews, where the letters go out, it's the 13th of Nisan. That's 2 days before Passover.
Okay.
And Esther says, everybody, I want you to fast for me for 3 days before I go to the king. They're fasting on the first night of Passover. Passover is the Exodus. You're bad to us, we leave. Persia, Purim is, you're going to try to hurt us, we're going to wind our way into government, and we're going to win. Right? Meaning, and we're going to stay.
Interesting.
And be very internalized here, right? Even at the end where Esther says to Ahasuerus, to the king, she says, well, if we were only going to be sold as slaves, I wouldn't have bothered you. It's like a reference to the Passover story. It's kind of remarkable. So here, there's no Exodus. There's no actually the opposite. They get more entwined. She's going to have to be with this man for the rest of her life. Nice Jewish woman, she's going to have to be with this man for the rest of her life.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Mordechai is going to have to use his political, and that's what it says at the end of the Megillah, that he's going to use his political acumen to protect the Jews. So you're an Israeli Jew, and you read this story, you know what you see? Jews are doing just fine in the diaspora. So they're going to have to domesticate it too. And I have a feeling the way I'm going to see the domestication is we focus less on the fact that it's diaspora and more on the joy, right? Like joy, we're saved, amazing, joy. Especially this year, Persia, Iran, oh my goodness, like there's so much to do there,
wow.
Right? But it's really, and my friend Dr. Aaron Kohler, who wrote a book on Megillat Esther, I only realized this from reading his book. The book is a very diaspora forward book. Then when you look at the way that the rabbis understood Megillat Esther, they bring Israel in. They say, well, you read the Megillah in walled cities that have been walled from the time that Joshua conquered the land. Right?
What's going on there?
We talk about that, right? Meaning, we talk about the fact that you don't say Hallel, which is this praise from Psalms that you say in other holidays. So they say, well, you don't say Hallel because it wasn't in the land of Israel. Right? And then they say, well, Megillah, we read the Megillah and that fills in for
right.
Hallel. But the point is, they're basically saying, we want you to know this is not in the land of Israel, this is not good. And here's the best one. Mm-hmm. So let's think about the historical timeline for a minute. Okay, the historical timeline, the first temple is destroyed in 586 BCE, okay? Mm-hmm. Cyrus, king of Persia, sends the Jews back, I don't know, 539 BCE. I'm not a historian, but something, 539 BCE. Yeah. And only 42,000 Jews go. That's not everybody. Right. It's not even close to everybody.
Right.
Only 42,000 people go to return to the land of Israel to rebuild the temple. Not super successful.
Yeah.
Okay? There's a second wave of people who go. But when does Esther happen? So it's interesting. Historians think that Esther happens after that first wave went back with only 42,000 people. Mm. Which means, what's the book of Esther? The people who decided not to go.
Right.
So, and they're fine. They're doing just fine. And in fact, the second wave that goes, and the more famous wave, people know them, Ezra and Nehemiah, people know them more because they're the big wave, right? The second wave goes after this story, not because they're scared of living in Persia, but because the Jews in Judea are having a really hard time because they're being mistreated there. Oh, Nebuch, Jews of Judea, we Persian Jews will come help you. And so, right? Meaning,
like you go in Israel for the year.
Exactly. But meaning like that, it's such a different way, but that's not the way that the rabbis present it. The rabbis often present it as, well, with Esther on the throne, then the Jews could finally go back to Israel.
Right.
Right? But if you look at the historical reality, you have an issue here, right? You have an issue here. These are the people who decided not to go back. What I think is remarkable is that whether it's the people who decided not to go back or it's a precursor to going back, I think it's remarkable that despite God's name not being in the Megillah, they choose to celebrate this as a religious victory. Right. That, to me, is the most remarkable piece. They're essentially saying, here we are in diaspora. We're not going back to Israel. We are experiencing our diaspora success, and we are attributing it to God, and it's not a sign for us to go anywhere. It's just, and that is fascinating and subversive, and it cannot be left that way. Okay. Right? Like, it cannot be left that way.
I have like 19 things to say. You had a lot
that means I talked for too long.
That's okay. It's more interesting to listen to you than to listen to me, certainly.
I don't know about that.
It's okay. A few things.
Yes.
One, some people knock that, right? Some people knock the, like, it's fragile at the end. So they live to live another day, but there's no like automatic, they're protected moving forward, and there's no run back to Israel. That it's kind of just like they survived this attack, if that makes sense.
So I think that is one helpful way to look at it. But it's not what the last 3 verses indicate.
Okay.
The last 3 verses say Achashverosh was super happy. He taxed his people, and even taxed people who weren't his people because they were so afraid of him. Achashverosh has Mordechai as his right hand. Mordechai is taking care of the Jews. That's how it ends.
Right.
Mordechai's taking care of the Jews. Now, we know, because we have the long arc of Jewish history, and we say, don't be ridiculous.
Right.
Don't be ridiculous. And by the way, welcome to America, 21st century, where Jews are saying to themselves, well, come on, we're doing fine. Aren't we doing fine?
Yeah.
We're doing fine. Right? Like, we'll get through this, or we got through that, so we'll get through this.
Right.
And then there are other people who are saying, maybe this is a harbinger of something really scary that's about to happen, a la things that we've seen happen in Jewish history in the past.
Right.
And that's why I think Purim for diaspora Jews this year is such a mirror to think about.
It always is.
Such a,
but
it's such a mirror, I would say.
So the other thing that you raised for me, I liked your Purim versus Hanukkah idea. It resonated deeply, and then you had the Purim versus Passover idea.
Yeah, they don't Exodus.
Well, I want to argue, now that I heard you say that Purim in some ways mirrors the end of the book of Genesis, right? Because Mordechai and Yosef, or Esther and Yosef.
Totally,
right?
you're the viceroy in a foreign...
Right. You're the viceroy in the foreign land, you come to power, the book ends that everything's going to be great because now you're in power, you're taking care of your people, we're staying in diaspora, that kind of thing. And then we fast forward and we say, we have a new king in town who doesn't remember Yosef,
so you're
doesn't remember
smart
Esther and Mordechai.
enough as a reader of Bible and not just a reader of this book to say, hey, Joseph made everybody slaves to Pharaoh in the lean years in order to protect them. Generation later,
and
the
taxed
Jews,
everyone, made money at the end, rich like Mordechai.
The Jews were became slaves to this new Pharaoh. So even the system that he set up ended up as the germ, as the seed for the danger to the Jews. So for sure, meaning you can also read. I'm just so shocked when you look in the book of Nehemiah, and he says why he's going back to Israel. He doesn't say because the Jews in Persia are in trouble. He says, I was in Shushan, and some Nebuch people from Judea came and told me how terribly things are going because the locals are making it hard on them. So I asked the king, whose name is a really fun name, Artaxerxes, and it's a great name. I asked him, can I please go and help my people? But and by the way, he does the same thing as Esther. He fasts, and he's like Mordechai, he puts on sackcloth. It's like the parallel, wait, have I seen that story before? So Esther and Mordechai could have just said, okay, we're out of here. Now, don't get me wrong, Persia's rule extends to there. But things in Judea weren't so great there either at the same time.
It's a solidarity mission to Israel.
It's a solidarity mission. But then he stays and he builds it and it becomes it. But you could argue that he's looking and saying, look, if we can't figure out a way to have a stable situation there, then when things get bad here, we're not going to be able, right? I mean, I'm just saying there's a lot to the story that has interesting echoes for today.
Well, so let me ask one more and add one more to that, because it was interesting. You were kind of like, Hanukkah is the military victory holiday, which Israelis can relate to. But when it comes to Purim, we're going to be thinking about joy. But I think
Israelis, I think, have to think about joy. Although Israelis are doing something else, which I'll share in a minute if you don't mind. But yes, I'm listening.
No, but I think pre-October 7th, I think PC people used to kind of feel like the Jews slaughter their enemies.
75,000 people
Purim,
at the end.
Right? And oh God, let's put that away.
Right.
So is that, and there is language around enough is enough. Let's give enemies.
So I have no doubt that there will be people who are looking at the Megillah this year, and what stands out to them is that number 75,000 at the end.
Right. And just the general idea of the freedom to destroy the people who seek to destroy you.
Right. So then there were the other people who will say, it's not about 75,000. It's about the fact that they're trying to kill you. Right. You have to defend yourself. They never took any of the booty. Right. That is repeated over and over again in the Megillah. in order to say we're not in it to steal from people, we're not there to take things from people's houses. That's not what we're here for.
Right.
We are here to destroy an enemy that is trying to hurt us. So like, I'm just saying that will be a refraction for some people. But to me, in the end, what that number does is it's just part of, well, two things. One, the parody that is Megillat Esther. The whole Megillah is such excess. Okay, a woman won't come to a party, she gets killed. The two Jewish protagonists literally have pagan names.
Right.
Mordechai is Marduk, Babylonian god. Esther is Ishtar. It's like ridiculous. These people are drinking for 180 days, right? They have to send out letters that women have to listen to their husbands.
Yeah.
Like there's just, there's a parody element to it. And so I kind of wonder if the 75,000 is also part of that parody. That's one. Second, I also say if there are 127 provinces and people are looking to kill Jews, that's a lot of people.
Right.
It's 127 provinces is a lot of people, right? So that's just something that I think about. And then the third thing is, who says they needed to kill that many people?
Right.
Nobody says, and on Purim we celebrate that we killed people, right? No, on Purim we celebrate that we were able to prevail over our enemies, right? So I think that that's really important. Nobody's putting like a stamp of, well, let me tell you, by the Geneva Convention standards, this would have been the right thing to do, right? This is what happened. This is the chaos that ensued when Ahasuerus said, sorry, can't stop the decree, can only have you defend yourselves. I'm going to depend on every Jew who's fighting people in their town to figure out their strategy of, like, it's a mess, it's a bloodbath, that's what it is, right? So in some ways, it's exactly the anti-Hanukkah story, right? Like the Hanukkah story, they're creating an army, they're supposed to have a strategy. This is chaos. It's total chaos. That's not what we want. We don't want chaos, right? And that's also why it's a diaspora holiday, because this group, these like local militias or whatever they became, they didn't become a Jewish army in Persia that now is out and about doing, training drills every year.
Sure.
That's not what it is. It's just not what it is. So it's, the whole thing is very, but you're right, it's echoes. These are all echoes and echoes. I also think a lot about, the fast of Esther, the day before Purim, because last year I saw something remarkable by an author, a writer. I think the name is Eliasaf Tal Or. I think I'm getting it right, or Tal. I don't remember.
Okay.
Who said, I read this last March, and I literally put the quote in a Google Doc on my computer because I was so moved by it. And they basically said, the fast of Esther is supposed to commemorate Esther saying, before I go to the king to ask, to try this strategy, everybody fast for me, right? So it's a petitionary fast. So this author suggested, actually, I think that for Israelis now, it feels like what Yom HaZikaron is, Israel's Memorial Day to fallen soldiers and fallen victims of terror, what that is to Yom HaTzmaut. Yom HaTzmaut, you're going to party. Independence Day, you're going to be so happy. And the day before, you lick your wounds. And this person was suggesting that Tanit Esther is a day to lick our wounds, meaning that even though, thank God, by all measures, it looks like we are winning this war, and in ways that we could not have predicted last year, Syria, Lebanon, I mean, what is even going on?
Right.
We need a day to say, oh my goodness, the toll, the cost of this, the human cost of this. We need a Tanit Esther. We need a day of fasting. And I think it is so significant to recognize that the day that we choose of the day of fasting is the first day of the war of Purim. We do not make that day the day of feasting. That is the day of fasting. And the Talmud calls it Yom Kihila Lakol, a day of communal coming together. And the idea is, this is just a time to be together and recognize the magnitude of loss and fear and trauma and tragedy, right? And that, I mean, I held it last year when I read it, and I hold it that much more this year when there is what to celebrate on Purim. There is so much, and I know as much as I'm saying it's diaspora, it's just beating our enemies. Like, there's so much to celebrate, thank God, in that regard. And people of faith will choose to celebrate that as a miracle, right? That's the amazing genesis of Purim. God's name is not in the story, but people choose to say, well, this is miraculous. I see God's hand here, right? That, I think you're in a similar moment here, right?
Yes. Okay. Again, so many questions. Amazing.
Maybe we should hang
out.
out more, not around this table. Exactly. It looks like
exactly, or just make this more regular. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
A few things.
Also,
One,
we are everywhere. I mean, we're talking about Arab Israelis, and we're talking about prevailing over our enemies. These are not usually things that are discussed together,
right?
Which is what I truly appreciate about this conversation. Right. We don't have to be on sides of an issue. We can just try to be our full moral Jewish selves.
Yes, just sitting at a Shabbos table.
Yep.
You know. Okay, two things. One, I love what you just shared about Ta'anit Esther, the fast of Esther.
Yeah.
Because I'm like a hardcore rationalist, I want to
You are a hardcore rationalist?
Whatever, I went to law school.
When?
I went to law school.
Fine. You're a legal mind.
I need categories to help me understand things. Just help me go one step further. Is what you're sharing, how is it different from Yom HaZikaron? Like Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut only refer to Israel's wars, and Ta'anit Esther and Purim refer to like global Jewish history, or it should be a second Yom HaZikaron? What's happening there?
I think it's actually...
It doesn't have to be them, it could also be your understanding.
I actually think it's more about ensuring that there's room in the celebration of Purim to recognize how much pain and loss there is as well.
With overcoming our enemies.
Yes.
Broadly.
Great. And I think that
to me feels like a diaspora holiday also.
We don't usually feel that on Purim. That's not usually, Ta'anit Esther is usually about almost like acting out, the almost, what's gonna happen, right? But now it feels like, before you get all shaken the grogger and, boo Sinwar, you got to appreciate that this has been terrible.
Right.
It's just been terrible.
Wow. So first of all, applying that to Israel feels very powerful. Applying it to America, it's different. Triumphing over our enemies in Israel, in America, is less
oh my gosh,
at the fingertips.
Do American Jews even say the word enemy?
Well, I think the typical American Jew is very focused on everything in Israel, but also defeating anti-Semitism in America, whatever that means. Also, it's a different defeat. It's not a. There's no bodies, so there are bodies, but it's not like war.
But I think that's very interesting.
Right.
Meaning, I even feel that it's like the American Jews. We can't necessarily identify. We're going to say people in keffiyas, right? Like that's what we're going to. Meaning, okay, there are organizations for sure that we can say, SJP is our enemy.
Right.
I'm okay with saying that, right? Like, but I don't talk about it that way, right? I talk about it as beating anti-Semitism. I talk about it as what's the legislation,
and winning is like politics.
enforcement.
There's no war. I want to pull out a couple of things you mentioned. You mentioned the kind of like some people see miracles in it. You talked a lot about the different truths that people not only hold in Israel, but live. I want to enter into the religious sphere with you for a couple minutes, right?
Let's do it.
The tomatoes are holier in Israel, or whatever you want to think about it. But like an element of the Purim story, like you said, is that God is not there.
God is not obvious.
God is not explicitly written in the text. Talk to me about the God part of living in Israel for you a little bit, if that's comfortable. Is it a holier place? Is it a holier place? Are you feeling that? Or however you want to go with it.
I think let me put it like this. I think that to be in the place where the whole thing started as a promise that go to the place that I will show you. The intimacy of that I will show you. I'm not even just going to give you a name, Abraham, and say find it on a map. I'm going to say I will show you. I really feel that. Meaning I feel a sense of covenant there that is, it's a homecoming. It's a sense that this is a place where God wants to meet us. I don't know why. I don't know how, but the weight of Israel as a place, both what's happened there, what's promised in the future there, and a sense of what it's supposed to stand for, which is an actual recognition that we are not God, that God is God, and that God has a relationship, a collective relationship with us. That is what that place, that's what it is. Meaning, and I understand people view things with different lenses, but that's what I feel. I feel at home in a different way. I feel at home in a different way.
So I want to go a few directions from there, but first let me start with now reflecting on the pieces around anti-Semitism versus war on Israel and those pieces. So there's a lens is protecting Jewish bodies, right? A lens is protecting the Jewish mission, let's say, right? Fighting for anti-Semitism in Israel is fighting for Jewish bodies or mission or the ability to do it.
Sure.
Does there feel like there's a different element, like people always joke if Israel was somewhere else and they were fighting with their neighbors around some other land, but obviously there's quote unquote a religious war here and a war about the land of Israel.
Yeah.
So how is that playing out for you also? Like what's like the,
Yeah,
how does the arts
the conversation about the land in Israel, as an American, the focus on it is so foreign to me. It's so foreign to me. At soldiers' funerals, in eulogies, people talk about the land of Israel, this beautiful land, this magnificent land. This land is good. It's ultimately good.
Yeah.
As an American Jew, I'm being honest, it is just not, it's not how my Judaism was shaped. Even as a Zionist, even as a religious person, even as somebody who, if I were to go, to a holy space, I would recognize it as such. But it's so foreign to me, and it's such an interesting conversation because I think that when you talk about land and religion, you have, let's go with three types of thinking, right? One type of thinking, which is land's about security. That's what it is. The more land you have, the fewer October 7ths.
And in key locations.
Key locations.
Sure.
Fewer October 7th, people who got kicked out of the Gaza Strip with the 2005 disengagement, on their way out, they said, you are now in danger. Kibbutzim, on the border of Gaza, you are now in danger because we are not there. And not sure they were wrong, right? That's one. It's about security.
Sure.
For other people, not about security. It's about God's command. We must conquer this land.
Conquer and settle.
That is our job. And then there's a third where people are trying to say, well, what do you do when there are two peoples who are both of this land? What do you do when people can trace their heritage back many generations to this land and they're not Jewish, right? So how are you gonna look at it as an exclusive zero sum? Now, I'm not saying that the desire to try to figure out how to share is giving up any of the religious significance of the land for Jews, and you have to be very careful not to give up the security significance. But the mutually exclusive, to me, is such a dangerous, I don't see how it doesn't lead to religious extremism. I don't see how it doesn't lead to militarism. I think it is incredibly dangerous. I just think it is incredibly, incredibly dangerous because it puts land above human life, whether Jewish or not. And I can't get behind it. I can't get behind it, which will make me very unpopular probably with some of my extended family members, who I love and I respect very much.
That's okay. We're in conversation.
But
People
yes.
learn.
Yes.
Great. In our final few minutes, we're like getting closer to that based on the last few questions. I know that one of the goals of this year was for you to research religious Zionism.
It's the best.
And I know you're not finished, and I'm sure you're collecting some thoughts.
Oh no, I'm finished. It's
You're
all
done?
done. It's great. 3 months, I'm good. 4 months, fine.
Exactly.
No problem.
Nailed it. It's
Nailed
like when
it.
I went to Pardes for the year, and I was like, I'm going to learn all of Judaism in 1 year, and then I'll go to law school.
And you did.
I was
Implanted
done.
a chip.
Yeah. I haven't
Implanted
had
a
to learn
chip.
anything new since.
Oh gosh, you're scaring me now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so here's what I'm researching.
Yeah, and what have you discovered?
Because, as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of polarized thinking.
Yes.
I'm just not.
Yeah.
I am researching religious Zionist thought on liberal democracy and on shared society with Jews and with non-Jews. And I am so inspired by what I find. And I'm not looking for people to be left-wing or right-wing. I'm looking for people to be able to express an affirmative religious value to democracy that treats everyone equally, to democracy that recognizes people's rights. And I'm looking for people who can express an affirmative religious value to being able to share society with other Jews who are not like you, and share society with non-Jews who are not like you. And I would say what I'm finding is, first of all, I'm finding a surprising political diversity among people who are writing about these things, because they're writing about religion, right? They're not writing about they're writing about religion.
Sure.
And B, I don't know if I said one or A.
That's fine.
But B, what I'm finding is, I think that some of the ways that they struggle with these issues are critiques and concerns that we ourselves, living in a democracy in America, should be aware of. So for example, when someone is affirming democracy from a religious perspective, because the essence of the human being is freedom, right? God wants us to choose freely of our own volition to do the right thing, right?
Right. Democracy is Judeo-Christian, and a Jewish value is the human life, or something.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I actually don't know that.
You're coming from here, not
I'm
from
coming
here.
from a different place,
For sure.
so I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that the value of the Jews deciding on Purim, this is God, and we want to turn this into a relationship builder, rather than a sense that God is holding the mountain over our heads and forcing us, or else, that is a bedrock of Jewish thought, and it's a rabbinic thought, really, and it's a bedrock of democracy. And at the same time...
Let's just make sure that we're clear. You're saying the idea of Jews entering into covenant speaks to the idea of treating every human being as equal.
What I mean is the idea of Jews entering into covenant with God in a non-coercive manner, which is the way the rabbis describe it. Purim being that moment where the Jews decide, here we are, it's in the Talmud.
Exactly. What's the connection with that in democracy?
That it actually shows non-coercion is actually quite important, and it's the bedrock of democracy. The bedrock of democracy is non-coercion. Every government has to coerce to a degree, but we want minimal coercion, minimal coercion, minimal coercion. But those same religious thinkers who are going to talk like that are also going to say, but you know, I have to be honest, not sure I'm so crazy about the fact that democracy prizes the individual and often completely forgets about the importance of the collective. Often democracy, saying what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, leads to an indifference to what's going on with other people. Or how about democratic laws that are totally exploitative of people, right? Like, religion has critiques, right? Religion has critiques, but what I want to see is I want to see the ability to both affirm and think critically about these things. And I'm really amazed by what I find, to be honest. Like, I'm kind of inspired, blown away. That's what I would say. That's like a taste of what's going on so far.
That's cool. It's interesting.
It's
and you're interviewing, I guess, current people and researching people who have
a lot of reading. I'm very I'm most intrigued actually by people who are willing to talk about this stuff after the Gaza disengagement, because I think for religious Zionism, before the Gaza disengagement, even though Oslo wasn't so easy for religious Zionism, Rabin's assassination prompted a whole sort of, in the religious Zionist community, we need to talk about democracy more.
Right.
But then the disengagement, which was ostensibly a democratic process because the Supreme Court let it happen, right? It's a slap in the face to the religious Zionist community. And so I want to see people who, despite that slap in the face, are still committed, even as they're also critiquing and saying, wait, hold on. Like sometimes if the same people are suffering over and over again within your democracy, then maybe we have a problem, right? Whether that's true or not true that the same people are suffering over and over again, it's a question.
Right.
But that's what I'm really, truly interested in.
Cool. We're excited for your next trip. When you come back in, we'll have to interview when your thoughts are fully baked for that.
Thank you. I look forward to
Dr. Elana Stein Hain.
Thanks.
What a treat, as always.
A treat for me.
Have an amazing Purim, a freilich Purim, as they say. And
Thank you.
we'll find out if your theories about how Israelis experience Purim will hold true this year.
Oh, I'll be sure to send you some photos of what I see.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ay, ay, ay,